It's Tuesday, March 14. In the headlines, the Finance Minister signs a compensation MOU with Jamaica Teachers Association. National Family Planning Board working to address the still problematic issues of contraception amongst teenage girls. In business news, Scotia Group earns increased profit. Regionally, ECCB insists on greater oversight of appointments to banking and financial boards. Further overseas, U.S. President Joe Biden offers assurances after a major U.S. bank's collapse. This is the news on PBC Jamaica. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Dr. Nigel Clarke, has signed the MOU on public sector compensation restructuring with the Jamaica Teachers Association. He made the announcement on his Twitter account Monday evening. He said, quote, "This paves the way for approximately $11.8 billion in retroactive payments to be processed for our teachers," end quote. JTA President-elect Mr. Leighton Johnson and Secretary General Dr. Mark Nicely were present at the signing. Delegates of the JTA on Sunday voted to accept the government's latest wage offer under the compensation review. The vote took place during a JTA special virtual conference after the Finance and Public Service Ministry sent a new offer to the association on Friday. Dr. Clarke has been calling on teachers to sign the wage offer or risk losing their back payments for this fiscal year, which ends on March 31. Opposition leader Mark Golding is set to make his contribution to the 2023-2024 budget debate in the lower house today, March 14. His presentation follows that of opposition spokesman on finance, Julian Robinson, and Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Dr. Nigel Clarke. The purpose of the budget is to decide how much money the government plans to expend on security, roads, water, housing, and other services it provides throughout the financial year. The financial year begins on April 1 and ends the following year, March 31. The government is proposing to spend a total of $1 trillion for the 2023-2024 fiscal year. This is Jamaica's first $1 trillion budget. Prime Minister Andrew Holness is the next speaker scheduled to participate in the budget debate. He is set to make his contribution on March 16. You can watch the 2023-2024 budget debate live on PBCJ at 2 p.m. or catch the live stream on all our social media platforms at PBC Jamaica. The St. James Health Department has extended its Mop-Up Catch-Up campaign until August 2023 as the Ministry of Health and Wellness moves to get more children immunized. Addressing the regular monthly meeting of the St. James Municipal Corporation, the Medical Officer of Health for the parish, Dr. Bailey Small, said the campaign aims to get children immunized against preventable diseases such as polio, measles, and tetanus. Here's more from Maya Chung.
Dr. Bailey Small explained that the Mop-Up Catch-Up campaign is focusing on the immunization program, which will see certain vaccines being given to Jamaican children for vaccine-preventable diseases. It was stated further that most of these diseases are not endemic to Jamaica, such as measles, tetanus, and polio. The program needs to find those children who should have been vaccinated but for some reason would have missed their appointments, hence the name Mop Up. Parents are being encouraged to play their part in ensuring that children are immunized at the appropriate age levels. In addition, it was noted that the department has been enlisting the help of schools and members of the wider community to urge guardians to take advantage of the initiative. Children in Jamaica must be vaccinated against the following preventable diseases: smallpox, pertussis or whooping cough, polio, tetanus or lockjaw, diphtheria, measles, mumps, rubella, and congenital rubella syndrome, hemophilus influenza type B, hepatitis B, and tuberculosis. Since 1986, the Public Health Immunization Regulations of the Public Health Act of Jamaica has specified that all children under the age of 7 years must be adequately immunized before school entry. For the news on PBCJ, I am Maya Chung.
Human beings are social creatures, and communication is a big part of that. Research has identified several ways that communication can lead to better outcomes. But what if your child is disabled and uses sign language to communicate? Learning how to read and write through that avenue becomes crucial. This is the first time Ari is reading a book in his language, Jamaican Sign Language. UNICEF's Jamaica's Accessible Digital Textbook Project aims to make learning more inclusive for all Jamaican students, whether at school, home, or in the community, partnering with the Ministry of Education and Youth and Book Fusion.
Education Specialist, UNICEF Jamaica.
The Accessible Digital Textbook Project, which is a partnership between UNICEF, the Ministry of Education, specifically the Special Education Unit, and Book Fusion, aims to harness the power of technology, innovations in technology that can increase the inclusivity, the ways in which learners with and without disabilities are able to engage meaningfully with content at home, at school, and in their communities.
Your brain is in your head.
You have sign language, you have the voices, but you also have the ability to make the text bigger and smaller, and you have activities that are embedded. So it's taking the digitization of content to a higher, more inclusive level.
Ari, 6 years old, student.
I am happy that I can share this book with my friend Michaela, and she is able to hear.
Stacey Ann Sturridge, Ari's mother.
What I know about the digital books is that they're trying to use them or incorporate them more in schools like Danny Williams to ensure that everybody is learning at the same pace or at the same level.
Heidi and Mitchell Dillon, Principal, Danny Williams School for the Deaf.
For the children with secondary disabilities, I can see that they too can interact with the book in that there are options there for them.
Rebecca Tortello, Education Specialist, UNICEF Jamaica.
For children who are deaf or hearing challenged, that to be able to click on that icon and see the interpretation validates their language, which for many of them it's their first language and English is their second language. If you see that and then they see that, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that it's a validation. It's a form of validation of their language.
Patrice Matheson, Classroom Teacher, Danny Williams School for the Deaf.
All the concepts and the content of the book, all the concepts are there, and everything that he needs to know that's in the story is actually done in his language. So it's definitely a plus for Ari.
Ari, 6 years old, student.
This is my first time reading a book that has sign language.
Stacey Ann Sturridge, Ari's mother.
With Ari, that's when I realized that we do not include a lot of our society. They are left to the side and we just, I guess, live our lives not even thinking about them, because I did not know a deaf person or a hard of hearing person before Ari. It made me realize that I should try my best to include more people in the things that I'm doing. Being left behind is total sadness. You don't want to be left behind, even as hearing groups. Even if all of us here, we are hearing and somebody is leaving you behind, you're going to feel sad. So everybody wants happiness. Everybody wants to move forward and be happy together.
Scotia Group Jamaica ended its first quarter for 2023 with a $2.2 billion increase in post-tax profit. For the 3 months ended January 2023, the financial group recorded a net income of $3.4 billion, representing a 173% increase over the comparative prior year period. Speaking at the company's first face-to-face annual general group since the COVID-19 pandemic, Scotia Group Jamaica CEO Audrey Tugwell Henry explained how the company managed such a feat.
This was predominantly due to the growth in our loan portfolios with both corporate and retail, which resulted in higher net interest income over the period. We also had higher insurance revenues stemming from improved cross-selling initiatives and deepening of our customer relationships.
Now for your market updates. In foreign exchange trading for Monday, March 13, the US dollar sold for an average of $153.09. The Canadian dollar ended trading at $111.58. The pound sterling traded for $185.24, and the euro sold for $165.56. In JSE trading, the JSE index declined by 1,581 points. The junior market index advanced by 11 points. The combined market index declined by 1,365 points, and the All Jamaican Composite Index declined by 745 points. Overall market activity resulted from trading in 116 stocks, of which 0 advanced, 0 declined, and 116 traded firm. Stocks advanced for Access Financial Services Limited, AMG Packaging and Paper Company Limited, and Barita Investments Limited. Stocks declined for 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited, Berger Paints Jamaica Limited, and Blue Power Group Limited. Trading firm were 138 Student Living Jamaica Limited Viable Preference, Derrimon Trading Company Limited, and Elite Diagnostic Limited. The overall volume leaders were Derrimon Trading Company Limited with over 14 million units, Jamaica Boilers Group with over 3 million units, and the Regency Petroleum Company Limited with over 1 million units. In regional stocks, in Trinidad and Tobago, Calypso Macro Index Fund was the only security posting a volume of 9 shares. On the Barbados Stock Exchange, West India Biscuit Company Limited was the sole security trading 63 shares. In regional business, JMMB Bank is looking to expand its footprint in Trinidad. The bank, which recently relocated its Port of Spain branch to Ariapita Avenue, says it is considering moving into communities to better serve its clients. Sunil Lala has more.
Chief Executive Officer of JMMB Bank in Trinidad, Sean Moses, says the financial institution has been doing well post-COVID, noting that it has exceeded its performance versus previous years.
Our balance sheet could stand the test of time. We were able to navigate COVID without any issues. We are very prudent in our decisions in terms of managing the assets within our portfolio as the bank, and our regulators keeps an eye on our balance sheet just as they do with any other financial institution.
He said the Jamaican-owned bank is now in a position to expand its reach regionally and is also considering expanding its reach here in Trinidad.
I do think there are many communities where we are not located presently that we could add significant value to the persons within those communities, so we are definitely assessing our options at this point in time to see which communities we would want to consider entering and offering our services.
Mr. Moses added that business has picked up for the bank, noting an uptick in loan requests.
Over the last year, I would say it has more than doubled for us, but I think that's because of the efforts we have been making to put our brand out there and reach out to the general public to let them know what we can offer.
He noted that JMMB continues to be a strong financial institution in Trinidad, in which all its entities are projecting consistent growth for the next fiscal year.
We are a subsidiary, so if there is a need, they will lend support, but we are actually quite strong on our own. Our balance sheet reads extremely well at this point in time, so we do not need to leverage on our parent for any financial support. We have been doing quite well.
That's in Trinidad?
The Trinidad. Each of our entities are doing quite well, and we all are projecting growth for the upcoming fiscal.
He said the recent relocation of JMMB's Port of Spain branch to the heart of Ariapita Avenue was a strategic move, which also allows more foot traffic into the bank.
It allowed us to do some cost savings, it allowed us to consolidate some offices, and the building did offer a better look and feel that we would like to associate our brand with.
In international business, sliding bank shares dragged Wall Street down, with investors worried about contagion from the Silicon Valley Bank collapse.
In what was arguably the most dramatic day on Wall Street so far this year, A rout in bank stocks Monday weighed on markets as investors worried about contagion from the Silicon Valley bank collapse. But you might not be able to tell by the closing numbers of the main indexes. The Dow dropped just under 0.33%, the S&P 500 shed over 0.1%, while the Nasdaq gained nearly 0.5%, as some sectors benefited from hopes the Federal Reserve could ease up on interest rate hikes. SVB's sudden failure on Friday, as well as Signature Bank, which was shut down by regulators Sunday, had investors worried about risks to other banks, despite extraordinary efforts by the U.S. government to protect depositors. First Republic Bank fell a whopping 62% as news of fresh financing failed to reassure investors. Western Alliance plummeted 47%, and PacWest dropped 21%. Trading in the stocks was halted several times. And shares of big banks, including J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo, also all lost ground. A silver lining to the crisis? Many investors speculated the central bank could now become less hawkish in its efforts to tame inflation. But Sean O'Hara, president of Pacer ETF's distributors, doesn't necessarily agree.
I would have to go with what they've been saying, which is they're going to continue to raise rates until they can tamp down inflation, and that job's not even close to being done yet. Maybe they'll change tune and use this as the excuse to sort of chicken out. I don't know. And so that leads us to the big question about whether we will or we won't have a recession. And if we do, how big of a recession is it going to be? Outside the banking industry, Pfizer shares rose after the drug maker said it would buy biotech company Seagen for nearly $43 billion.
In market data for oil prices fell more than $2 a barrel, extending the previous day's slide as the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank rattled equities markets and sparked fears of a fresh financial crisis. Brent crude futures were down $1.11 to $79.66, and West Texas Intermediate crude were down $1.24 to $73.56 a barrel. And that was the business report on PBCJ. I'm Danita Rodney.
In regional news, 3 years after Guyana recorded its first COVID-19 infection and death, the country has finally been able to secure more than 5,000 Paxlovid COVID-19 pills worth $100 million. Those pills were handed over to Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony on Monday at the Ministry of Health Brickdam, Georgetown head office.
On March 11, 2020, Guyana recorded its first COVID-19 case and death. For the last 3 years, Guyana has grappled with the novel coronavirus, implementing new measures to control the spread of the virus and how people were infected. On Monday, after months of lobbying, new COVID-19 treatment pills, the Paxlovid pills developed by Pfizer Inc., were added to Guyana's arsenal to fight the deadly disease. They were donated by the local United Nations Children's Fund office.
Generally, because of the high cost and also high demand, it was not accessible to lower and middle income countries. But UNICEF, through our partners, we make sure that all these countries are accessible, have access to these medicines, including Guyana. So finally, today we are here to hand over the 5,040 boxes of Paxlovid, which includes 151,200 pills to treat 5,040 patients in Guyana.
Guyana's Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony said these pills will be distributed across the country and will boost healthcare.
How these medications work, it's really an antiviral medication, and as you know, SARS-CoV-2 is a virus. And so at critical points in the life cycle of the virus, it would interrupt that life cycle, and by doing so, prevent the virus from replicating. And it has been quite effective in doing so. So most people who use this medication actually saw a reduction in the time that they spent, and even if they were very symptomatic, you would see that change quite rapidly.
Importantly, though, these pills have been secured at a time when Dr. Anthony believes the COVID-19 threat has been well managed.
Right now, we are not seeing a lot of cases. In fact, we have 13 active cases right now. And over the weekend, we recorded 3 new cases. So it's at the lowest level that we have seen so far. And Dr. Boville will probably tell us there are almost no patient at the hospital. So that's a very positive thing. And we want to keep it that way, but just in case we have patients, we now have medication that we can use for those patients.
With the Paxlovid pills, Dr. Anthony believes that Ghana's efforts at managing the disease will continuously improve. Reporting for the newsroom, I am Vishani Raghaber.
In Belize, one of the significant strides made by the Briceño administration in 2022-2023 fiscal year was the reduction of public debt. On Monday, Prime Minister Briceño boasted a decrease of more than $1 billion in public debt since taking office.
In December 2022, the total public debt stood at $4,031 million, or the equivalent of 64.1% of GDP. $2,716 million represented loans to external lenders, while $1,314 million was owed by government to domestic creditors. 67 cents of every dollar of debt is owed to foreign creditors and 33 cents of every dollar to local creditors. To meet the terms of this debt stock during this fiscal year, government paid some $112 million in interest and $97.5 million in principal repayments. Of every dollar in total revenue and grants for this budget year, government therefore paid 8 cents in interest. The average interest rate on the public debt comes in just under 3%, though rising interest rates globally will nudge upward the cost of financing the public debt. Each year, going back 20 years, the IMF, based on what it called a debt sustainability analysis, has appraised Belize's public debt as unsustainable. In contrast, this administration, through its public debt management operations, has reduced the amount owed by the government by over $1 billion.
The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, ECCB, wants greater oversight of the process of who is being appointed to banking boards and boards of other financial institutions.
Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Sir Timothy Antoine, has commended the Terence Drew-led administration for its tabling of 2 banking bills, namely the Banking Amendment Bill 2023 and the bill to amend the ECCB agreement in the National Assembly on March 7th, which will help to protect the financial system. While addressing media practitioners in St. Kitts and Nevis as part of the bank's 2023 country outreach mission on March 8th, Mr. Antoine said slow passage of legislation poses the single biggest strategic risk to ECCB's transformation agenda, while outlining several pieces of legislation that are yet to be put into place to protect the financial system.
It would be the Banking Amendment Bill. One of the things that that bill does is to clarify the fit and proper criteria for members who sit on boards of our banks or licensed financial institutions. I mean, there are deposits in the currency union of 25 billion. I don't have the number for St. Kitts and Nevis to hand, but obviously it's a few billions as well. National Bank alone, the size of National Bank is a $3.6 billion bank, the single largest bank in the currency union. It's very important, Mr. Williams, that the people who sit on these boards are fit and proper. They have the requisite skill, they have the requisite integrity, they have the requisite commitment to serve as board members and senior management. And one of the things that the amendment does is to require that people who are nominated to serve on these entities are referred to the central bank to ascertain that they are fit and proper.
In news further overseas, U.S. President Joe Biden has tried to reassure Americans that the country's banking system is safe after the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. It is the largest failure of a U.S. bank since the 2008 global financial crisis, but Biden says customers and taxpayers won't bear any losses. Al Jazeera's Kimberly Halkett reports.
After a weekend of dramatic White House emergency actions, U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday announced
that the banking system is safe.
Biden made the announcement following the collapse of Silicon Valley and Signature Bank last week, two of the largest bank failures in U.S. history. On Friday, U.S. authorities shut down Silicon Valley Bank to protect depositors, doing the same on Sunday for Signature Bank. But Biden says even though both are now under federal control, unlike the 2008 financial crisis, taxpayers won't foot the bill.
No losses will be borne by the taxpayers. Let me repeat that. No losses will be borne by the taxpayers. Instead, the money will come from the fees that banks pay into the Deposit Insurance Fund.
Instead, the cost of covering the deposits will be paid for out of an emergency fund set up by a government agency known as the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or FDIC. It's funded on a quarterly basis by the banks themselves. Additional bailouts will also come from selling off Silicon Valley Bank's assets. The banks funding their own bailout, not the taxpayer, is a key difference from 2008, when the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP, used taxpayer money to purchase $700 billion in toxic assets from the banks. And unlike in 2008, those who sought to make money through investments also won't be saved with taxpayer funds.
Investors in the banks will not be protected. They knowingly took a risk, and when the risk didn't pay off, investors lose their money. That's how capitalism works.
On Monday, anxious customers waited outside New York's Signature Bank.
Everyone should be worried.
This is something I did not expect.
The fallout from the banking crisis isn't just an economic problem for President Biden, but also a political one. With still soaring inflation and an economy in recovery, the White House knows the president can't afford any new economic shocks, just as he's set to announce his 2024 presidential re-election campaign. Kimberly Halkett, Al Jazeera, the White House.
And that's the news on PBCJ. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. You can follow us on our social media platforms at PBC Jamaica. Thanks so much for watching.